Welcome to Fully Charged with Kendall and Sheila Qualls. On today's episode, we're going to give you a peek into who we are, why we think the way we do, and how we became the face of this movement to turn our culture around. Well, we were just regular folks, right? Just living our lives, raising our kids. But night after night, we would just sit in front of the TV and hate the way that we saw America characterized because we knew that it was inconsistent with what we know.
Right.
So we decided to get involved. So at first, I donated secretly a few dollars to a campaign, which was a pretty big deal for me. And then next, we thought that we would put a yard sign in our yard. That would be pretty bold.
Well, donating to the secret person, that's pretty bold. I still don't know who that is.
I'll tell you later.
Okay.
But how we went from putting a yard sign in our yard to you running for Congress, that still kind of escapes me. Because we're not politicians. I mean, we're just regular people. We never aspired to be politicians. But we felt like we just couldn't sit by day after day and watch our country deteriorate. So you ran for Congress. You didn't prevail. Yes, you didn't prevail. But after the race, your supporters said, hey, Kendall, we really need your message to stick around.
Right. Well, here's the scenario. I didn't think my message was that significant. Like everyone, we all have our stories, right? That idea that a kid can start his life no matter where in this country and can achieve the things they want in life, I just assumed that was legitimate. That was there. And guess what? It worked out for us. Mm-hmm. And the fact that the left is telling people that doesn't work, I just felt obligated. We felt obligated to do something about it.
Yeah, so we started Take Charge to counter this narrative, this prevailing narrative that we hear about the black community, because we know it's not true. That's not our experience, and we know it's many other people's experiences that we know. So every week we're going to dive in and discuss issues that plague our society. And we're not just going to talk about the problems, though, because I know you are a solutions guy.
That's right.
We're going to offer solutions and hope and unity for the future. You remember when our kids were little and we would have them do something that they didn't like and they would start complaining and you would always say, welcome to America.
That's right. Hard work is going to be part of everything in life. It's not fair. Welcome to America. Life's not fair. No excuses. Let's get up and get the work done. Okay. And here's the scenario for us. And, at the end of the day, where you start in life is not where you have to stay in life. And that the promise of America works for everyone, regardless of race and regardless of social standing in life. And what I share and what we share with people is this. Everyone's story is going to be different. That pathway is going to be different. But to say that it can't happen is such a defeatist attitude, and it's not the very nature of who we are as Americans.
Yeah, and we know that all that's happening in our country and the stats and stuff, that is not due to white privilege, and it's not due to racism. And we have the data, and we can prove it.
Not only do we have the data, we have our life experiences. Our parents grew up in the Jim Crow segregated South. They never had any kind of mindset like the mindset that we hear today. And the lives that they lived is very different from the lives we lived. And I tell people all the time, my parents would have loved to have grown up in the America that I grew up in. But what's driving the racial disparities today is not racism, it's not white privilege, it is the fatherless home problem that started in the late 1960s with the introduction of the Great Society and their welfare program.
Yeah. I mean, it's amazing what a social welfare program, what that did. It totally changed the character of the black family.
Well, it's really sad, to be honest with you. I call it a cultural genocide when you go from 80% two-parent families when we were kids to 80% fatherless homes today in the majority of black neighborhoods. 80%. And there's never been one attempt to reverse the trend. That's just the awful thing about it, and that's what we're doing. We're taking the bull by the horns with Take Charge, and we're starting that movement of reestablishing two-parent families, not just in the black community. We believe that it is the basic building block for every civilization.
Absolutely.
And kids do better in these kind of environments.
And I just find it shocking that the federal government would incentivize women to have children as long as they remain unmarried.
Well, you know, when you spell it out,
nuts.
what the program actually does, first time in American history where federal government incentivized women to have children outside of marriage. Started in the mid-'60s and it heavily promoted in the black communities. 50 years later, we have what we have today. It's been tragic. And again, I believe that was maybe unintentional that first decade, but after 2 decades, 3 decades, there's never been an attempt to reverse it. And these kids have been paying the price in these communities, a huge detriment to their academic achievement, to their life goals, and we just see it in criminal record.
So they introduced this program in the late 1960s, and then 20 years later, we were in high school. We remember, we started seeing on the news every single night, gangs, drugs, violence.
Well, what happened was those kids that were born without fathers in the 60s and early 70s grew up without discipline, without the structure, and what we saw was the statistics. In fact, the FBI tracks violent crimes, and starting in the say mid to late 70s up into the 90s, record levels of violent crimes for the first time we've ever seen in this country, as a result of a government program initiating basically births outside of marriage. And so in 1994, we remember Bill Clinton and the crime bill.
Yeah.
Well, that crime bill was as a result of cities across the country, people across the country saying, we can't take this crime anymore. They came in to help with if we remember, it's like 100,000 cops that the federal government helped subsidize. They spread across the country as a result of that issue going on in our country.
Yeah, so what we're looking at, it's really not a racial issue.
Absolutely not. And data's coming out, and you can see that it expands beyond ethnic lines. For us in the black community, we've been on this road for 50 years. We're just the canary in the coal mine for the rest of the community. So we're going to address this thing head on and really get back and focus in the black community on the roots of what the community was before the Civil Rights Movement,
Yeah.
which was faith, family, and education.
And I love those graphics that you see, the graphic where you only see the blue bars.
Yes, yes. Yeah, what we find with people that are proponents of critical race theory, they'll show you the disparities of income disparities. Look at the income disparities. Well, yeah, you see the income disparities. On this particular slide, you actually see, Asian Americans earning nearly $100,000 a year, white Americans just over $77,000 down the line. And they show the huge disparities in black Americans at the lowest. But what they never will show you is the corresponding effect of fatherless homes by demographic. There's a direct correlation.
And with marriage too, it's the same thing.
Well, absolutely. When you reverse it, in every demographic, marriage reduces poverty rates by 80 to 90% in every demographic. But you'll never see the traditional nuclear family promoted as a solution with the progressive left.
Yeah, you never see the data broken out, like what we're talking about. Because when you compare apples to apples, when you compare two-parent children and black children in two-parent families to white children in two-parent families, there's almost no difference. They graduate high school at the same rates.
Right.
They have the same rate, running with the law. But the problem is, and for married black couples, the average income is $75,000 a year. But we only make up 25% of the population.
Right. So our data is skewed because 75% of that population is fatherless homes, and they're making roughly about $31,000. And a lot of that is public assistance. The issue is that, look, we're not haters. We want to promote those things that benefit all of us. And what we've been on a road that for the last 50 years that has led us astray. And unfortunately, there hasn't been any leadership to try to redirect that. Mm-hmm. And so as Americans, we never wait for government. We don't seek permission from anybody. We can do this ourselves. That's what Take Charge is all about.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you're here with me doing it.
I'm glad to be here.
Well, look at you.
What you're talking about, all these statistics and data and what happened with the social welfare programs, that video that came out about a week ago that went viral, that's a direct result of what has been happening in our community. The video with the toddlers fighting with the police, I mean, it's absolutely disturbing and it's sad. It was first published on Alpha News. These angry children who are just cussing at police officers, adult police officers, while they're attempting to serve a search warrant.
Well, you know what's sad about that? Just in a whole graphic around it, you have, well, you call him a toddler. He's barely a toddler. He's probably just made 3 years old, outside, in an outside environment, in his underwear, no shoes. All he is wearing is underwear, and he's cussing like a sailor.
Yeah.
And he can't, poor kid, can't read or anything like that. You can feel and hear the hatred.
It's heartbreaking.
Coming out of that young child, and that's a product of 5 generations of welfare in the black community and what has done to us. And I tell you, you know what, this is evil, that is what's happened, and we're going to reverse it.
Yeah, it is. It's not white privilege, it's not systemic racism. You know, these government programs, we failed these kids. And these kids are the reason why we got involved and why we're doing what we're doing, because we've got to turn this thing around.
Well, you know what, Sheila, you know my story. You know, I have family members that have lived that life. And it's only by the grace of God that I got out. I'm the only one in my family that have actually escaped that environment. And the formula works. And here's the evil thing about it. There are leaders in the community that know what's really going on, but they've been blaming everyone else for it. And that, you know, the time for that is over.
Yeah, you're
time
right,
for that is over.
you know?
It's wrong and it's evil.
Yeah, it's like you say, change the narrative and we change the culture.
Right.
And that's actually the basis of the documentary that we just put out, which is pretty cool.
Oh, yes.
How did you come up with that brainchild? Even though
Oh, you seem shocked. I do have good ideas.
you have great ideas, honey.
Oh, now we want to go there. Yes. So our documentary, I'm a Victor, not Victim, was just the story of the lives of the people in the Twin Cities. I went to people in the black community of the Twin Cities and started recruiting people and say, look, we didn't used to live like this. We need to turn this thing around. And I'm just so fortunate. So many people came forward, told their stories, and wanted to help change the culture back to faith, family, and getting a better education for our kids.
Yeah, and it's so exciting that, you know, it's just taken off like wildfire. The premiere night, the theaters were packed, and it was just so much fun. And I don't know, I just kind of got teary-eyed just thinking like, wow, you know, you did this.
No, we did this, and like I said, you know, literally, I want to give thanks to God for this. I mean, we're just the messengers. We're just the messengers. And that the fact that these people, we didn't even know them, you know, a year and a half ago.
Yeah, I know.
And that they're willing to share and be vulnerable about their stories in this documentary. There are people with teary-eyed during that 1-hour documentary, and people stayed, as you know, 30, 40 minutes behind just for the Q&A session.
Yeah,
Cool. Just very honored to have that done. I hope it does well and goes viral, and we're getting a lot of press behind it, and just really proud that something out of Minneapolis, not just the rioting and the looting, but something actually positive and beautiful coming out of it is something that's exactly what we need here in the Twin Cities.
Yeah, so on this podcast, we'll talk about issues that are actually pillars of our society.
Exactly. You know, what we're having, and so what viewers are going to find out and what listeners are going to hear from us, there's not just issues around race and racism. We're going to talk about the things that have made this country great, the 5 pillars that it stands on and it has stood on for over 200 years, and how the progressive left is attacking it. Like the nuclear family, the traditional nuclear family. They're really calling that now an extension of white privilege and a systemic racism.
So sad.
It is sad, and we'll talk about that. We'll talk about the traditional American values that all brought us together and how they wanted to divide us. And all of these would be about solutions. We're going to talk about our education system.
So important.
Yep. We're going to talk about faith. Yet, shockingly, yes, our country was interwoven with faith components.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
You can only be a self-governing country based on people governing themselves and based on a lot of those religious values.
Yeah, in order to govern yourself, you have to have religion in your
That's
life.
right.
You've got to have virtue. You've got to have values.
And then the last pillar, I think, was just very important. The one thing that help us become independent is the capitalist system. Again, the left is really attacking that, and it is the one system that has lifted up billions of people out of poverty, including myself, over the last 10 to 20 years. And there is just an ideology issue that they're attacking against capitalism, putting it in the same category as white supremacy and evil and all these other things. So, and sadly, you will find out and we'll talk about where it's coming from and, again, what we can do about it.
Well, great. Well, you know what? That'll do it for this first episode of Fully Charged. So please go to our website. And if you like what you see, please support us. And also, please subscribe to our website. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, follow us on Spotify, or any of the other podcast platforms. And if you like,
go ahead.
Please give us a 5-star rating.
Well, I wasn't going to say that. I was going to say, if you go to that website, it's takechargemn.com, takechargemikenovember.com. And if you like what you see, you like what you hear, also help support us. Contribute to our organization. We're a nonprofit organization. And we are basically starting a narrative that's very counter to what we're hearing in the public arena. So thank you for joining us.
We'll see you next time.